Welcome to our ND Community Podcast. I'm Catherine and I'm a mother to 3 autistic ADHD daughters.
My name is Lorna and I'm a mother to an autistic son. We are going to be exploring stories and resources around lived ND experiences here in Guernsey. In this podcast, we're speaking to Liam. Liam set up Apollo with the intention to support children who fall through the gaps in our systems here in Guernsey.
So, welcome to the podcast. Today we're delighted to talk to Liam from Apollo, who we have in. Apollo was set up 2023.
Yes, in spring 2023.
So, Liam, please do tell us about Apollo and your reason for setting it up.
So, Apollo's a social enterprise, and I guess it'd be good to start with what our vision is, what our mission is. So, Apollo's vision is a bailiwick of young people who are empowered to play their best hands in life, irrespective of the cards that they've been dealt. I saw a lot of young people whom I was working with in education and in the third sector who were slipping through the cracks. So we invited them to a board meeting at a local financial services business.
Yeah.
And we asked them, why is it you've been engaging with us? What are we doing different that you value? And their answers fell into 3 buckets, which is consistency, freedom and agency, and feeling valued. So that's something that they've missed throughout their support so far, and it's something that we've been able to provide them.
Can I ask, what kind of age range are you looking at?
The youngest we work with at the moment is 9 years old, and the oldest I work with is 19.
And can I ask, when you said these people are falling through the gaps, can you just elaborate on that? What gaps is it that they're falling through?
I'd have to name specific services, but I won't name specific services.
Can you give us instead an idea of what it looks like when they're falling between the gaps? So how do you know that they're not resonating with those services?
Because they're saying no, and they're not turning up, and they may be going to an initial session, maybe they're going to 2, and they're saying no. And we're seeing that increasingly in education, social services. They're not engaging. And I was within the cracks in education, in the third sector, and having quite good progress, but meeting barriers and being told, no, we can't do this. Really simple example, doing learning support at a comprehensive school over here. A child's been internally excluded, so kicked out of the classroom. He's dysregulated. Okay, I'll take him for a walk. Walk, regulate, talk, and then we can return. And I was told, no, you can't take children out onto. It wasn't even off site. It was just walking on the football field, having a chance to talk, calm down, and really simple things.
So those are the things that you'll now do differently.
I start Apollo and I get to do exactly what I think's needed, which is brilliant. So we ask kids what they want to do, and then we make it happen. So our service cycles, there's 3 stages to it. You have one-to-one mentoring, you have youth groups, and then you have adventures. So you think one-to-one mentoring is very intense, it's one-to-one relationship building, and then the next stage you graduate them to youth groups. So these are needs-based, high ratio with 5 staff, and we're going to be 3 to 4 staff in each youth group. And then those are going to be a little longer, but there's more children involved, more staff involved. And then the third stage, which we started to do in 2024, is adventures off island. We did our first camp, so three of the kids that we took on camp had never been on a camping trip before. Challenging behaviours, and we can't keep them safe, and all the rest of it. So to deliver that as a pathway, it's a beautiful thing.
And with regard to the mentoring, what does that look like? Is there like a program there, or do you meet the child where they are and just develop from that kind of aspect?
So it's child-led, and that's not, I truly mean that. We ask the kids, what is it you want to do? So in the space of a week, I'm doing boxing, I'm going fishing, I'm doing arts and crafts, I'm walking, going sea swimming. So it depends what they want to do. Oftentimes they're interested in something, or they used to do something, but they haven't had the right support to access that.
it's really interesting because you say child-led. Now we hear the term child-centred a lot. What's the difference between child-centred and child-led?
Child-centred is a prioritisation of the young person's needs.
Okay.
Child-led is asking the child, right, what are we doing today? And then actioning it. Different things. You've got to be pretty brave and you've got to be pretty proactive to make the latter happen.
Yeah.
So we do that in our one-to-ones. We ask the young people, what is it you want to do in this time? Our sessions are 90 minutes. You can do whatever you want to do within reason. We have been paddleboarding, kayaking, jumping. There's a load of things that we've been up to. And then on the collective level, we've invited all of those kids and said, right, what do you want this organisation to be? What are we doing right? What could we do better? That sense of agency and them actually having a say in what we're doing as an organisation. It's the reason why we're getting these kids. So I think 54% of our kids have refused school or support services.
Yeah.
The reason they're engaging with us is because we're giving them that agency.
And how long do you find those kids that have school distress are often the children who maybe can't leave their bedroom or they can't leave the house for an extended period of time? How do you have them have time to actually just sit with them in that space until they feel confident with you, and then feel confident with you to be able to get out of the house? How much time can you give it?
Okay, I've got another young person who I'm working with at the moment. He's ASD.
Yeah.
No, actually, he's not been diagnosed with ASD. There's just professionals who think that he's ASD.
Yeah.
And super quiet. Didn't leave the house for months, literally months. Mum calls me, this is a direct referral, not from social services, saying she doesn't know what to do. She's had a visit from the doctor, a visit from a social worker. There's been a few labels thrown into the mix. I mentioned ASD, generalised anxiety. And my first meeting with him was sitting down and playing Dobble, game after game. And we spoke about play off camera before. So young people respond to play. They don't respond to an authority figure or a social worker coming in and asking them questions through their door. But they do respond to somebody who's a bit more human. You're turning down the dial of the pressure, and then you're doing something that's not necessarily verbal. Whether or not he's ASD, I'm not sure, but he doesn't respond to lots of verbal content in an interaction. And we've been out, haven't got him quite swimming yet, but we go out, we went berry picking in the summer, going for walks on the cliffs, rain or shine, loves it. And now he's attending our needs-based youth group, Ember, which is designed for young people with ASD, social anxiety, school distress, all the rest of it. So he's got a social group now. He's not going to school at the moment. It's a bit too much. But yeah, that's been his pathway so far. Ideally, I'd love to get him on a camp.
So it feels like nature is kind of a common theme here. It's like being active, being out in nature.
Yeah.
Seems to kind of reach these children in a way that maybe...
I would say so. It's an emphasis that we have in our practice, being outside to the extent that we can, in nature to the extent that we can. And young people, I mentioned about my learning sport role, take a kid outside and go for a walk, and you're turning that dial right the way down. If you're in a really closed room and you're using verbal instructions, it's too much. Going for a walk and then letting the young person, when they're ready, open up. That's a lot more effective. I wait for the young person to start chatting. So the last boy that I mentioned is, you would think that he was mute. He's so quiet. And they've attempted to remotely educate him and he's just been monosyllabic or just not saying anything at all. During the latter end of those sessions, chat. In the youth group now, he's chatting away. It's
because his system is calmer and things just...
he's not got this heightened stress response system where he's sort of freezing. Youth groups as well, they're all outdoor. I don't mind if it's tipping down with rain, it's windy, we're going outside. There's a lot of complaints before we go outside, never after.
So you mentioned that your child there potentially was looking at a diagnosis of ASD. So in Apollo, how many, what kind of percentage would you be looking at for children who maybe are ND?
We're 83.3% who are neurodivergent.
Well, that's high.
SEND, yeah. So that's pretty much all of them. I mentioned off camera there are several of those young people
Awaiting diagnosis,
or the parents aren't pursuing diagnoses. You would probably say they have something, and then there are young people who, of those 83%, I would question whether they have a special educational need or it's symptoms of developmental trauma. Very high ACE scores. They've seen things that would damage and impair the functioning of any person.
So just for people listening, can you tell us what developmental trauma is and what the ACE scores are?
Yes, I can. Yes, of course. So ACE is an acronym for Adverse Childhood Experiences. If you suffer traumatic experiences as a child, then your life outcomes are going to be impaired dramatically across things such as you're far more likely to smoke, be victim to drug or alcohol abuse, you're far more likely to harm other people, you're far more likely to be harmed by other people, you're more likely to have asthma, you're more likely to develop cancers. There's a whole host of mental and physical health consequences that happen downstream of suffering traumatic experiences. The higher the ACE score, so the higher the incidence of traumatic experiences, the higher the likelihood that you're going to have these impaired life outcomes.
And a lot of those things are outside the child's control. So I think one of the ACEs is if you have a parent who dies, for example, or if you have a parent who goes to prison, that increases your ACE score dramatically. And of course, these things are outside of a child's control. However, they have impacts on their behaviour and their life, going through life, and the whole impact of that is kind of tainted. Is there any way they can kind of get around that?
Really good question. So Dr. Bruce Perry, who's one of my sort of formative remote mentors, never met him, just read his books, he says that oftentimes it only takes one quality relationship with a trusted adult to help a young person get over developmental trauma. So what we're doing, one way you could sort of envisage what we're doing with Apollo is we're trying to create a therapeutic web for these young people. You not only have the initial trusted adult, which matters hugely, but you graduate them to a youth group where they meet other young people, and then there's more trusted adults.
Yeah, makes sense.
And again, it might not necessarily be this emphasis on talking about what happened to you, but it's sharing experiences that they might not access without this support and the throughput from one-to-one mentoring to a youth group. Some of the young people that I work with have experienced things that, in a way, they've had existential crises that even adults haven't had because they haven't seen the things that they have. So what they need is somebody to hold their hand and sort of help them through life a little bit. Oftentimes their parents aren't in a state where they can help them to do that. They've suffered things as well.
So that all feeds into Bessel van der Clark, is that his
Bessel
name?
van der
Yeah,
Kolk,
Body Keeps the Score.
that's another giant in the space.
Yeah.
So for Bessel van der Kolk, and this is Bruce Perry's piece as well, it's not just that there's an emphasis on talking therapies, which is higher cortical function. It's that there should be the somatic approach, so something that's embodied, something that's shared, something physical. So his sort of seminal work was The Body Keeps the Score. So trauma isn't just thoughts that you have, it's not just you remembering what happened to you, it's your physiological response and how your physiology has been impaired from experiencing that trauma. So we mentioned before, like a heightened stress response. Some of the kids I work with, they're like rabbits in the headlights. They're literally frozen. their bodies are attuned to a level of stress that they can't tone down from.
Yeah.
And the approach that is appropriate, especially for younger kids, isn't talking about it. It's sharing experiences with trusted, not just adults, with other young people. Things mentioned in Van der Kolk's and Bruce Perry's work: yoga, rocking, hugging, dancing.
That's really interesting, because for a lot of our community, so if somebody's either really happy or really stressed, they may rock, or they may flap, or they stimming. You know, it all feeds into that regulation piece.
Yeah. And it's for the ND as well. What's difficult, especially for autistic young people, is that they're not going to naturally seek out those sorts of experiences. Not just because they're introverted, because they've got issues around sensory issues, or for one of the ASD young people I work with, he doesn't even like you sitting too close to him.
Or I would suggest our society doesn't like to see those behaviours. So actually they will stop themselves stimming when they need to, and then the pressure just builds up, because they're aware that other people may
socially not acceptable, maybe to start rocking,
or they're not allowed to,
for example.
These sort of self-soothing behaviours. I know a young person who bites himself till he bleeds, so that's a way that he can, without drawing attention to himself.
So taking the information that you've learned over how many years and the things you've read about and what have you, how can we as parents in our own home start doing little things to help our children regulate?
Okay, full disclosure, I don't have any children, nor do I have any children that are neurodiverse, so I don't feel like I'm really qualified to be giving that as explicit advice. I have a couple of ideas.
Okay.
I have a couple of ideas. When we say neurodivergence, I'm thinking predominantly autism, ADHD.
Yeah.
Predictability and routines. Things need to be, all humans work to a routine, and if you think you don't work to a routine, you do. It's just not conscious. I think that those are really impaired at the moment. I think that's a social problem, not just in the ND community. Sleep hygiene's just become a mess. So having a quality wind down routine, devices away, at least an hour before bed, ideally more. You're not getting blue light, you're not watching television, and you're allowing your system to settle, and there needs to be consistency in that. It's not, bedtime's 9 tonight, but you can stay up till midnight tonight, or bringing a phone to bed's catastrophic. But in terms of ND kids, what you can do in the home, predictability, consistency and routine,
So not dissimilar to your mission yourself.
Well, values are, consistency is a really interesting thing that young people brought up, and you can break down what that value was in two of the main bits of feedback we got from the young people, is that it's the same person every time. It's that I see Liam, or I see Jess,
That's really
or I see
important.
Matt, and it's that it's happening every week. It's that consistency. And in terms of,
does that consistency then build connection? Because I feel like maybe a lot of children just don't feel connected anymore. They don't feel connected to a person. They feel let down maybe by society, maybe by the educational environment. They're not quite sure where they fit in. And then we have their parents who are trying to do the right thing by potentially getting them into school. But school is actually not always the right environment for these children. And so they then almost become disconnected from their own parents. So is it about building connection first and foremost? It's about having that kind of level of trust with someone who you feel, you get me, I feel safe with you, and so then we can work on this consistency?
Yeah.
Is it almost taking a step back
Yes.
before you can step forward?
Trusting relationships are the vehicles for growth and change. And I won't use any specific examples, but imagine that there's a young person who's been brought up in a neglectful or abusive household. They go to school, and because of their heightened stress response systems, because they haven't had any positive role modelling, they act out, so they're punished. So they're excluded. They don't have proactive parents. Our social services aren't set up in a way where we go and pick up those children. That's why we started Apollo. So imagine what that young person's world is. I'm not loved at home. I'm sort of cowed. I'm not loved at school either. I'm actually kind of excluded. And then for some of the young people that we work with, I see that.
Yeah.
And some of the things that are said to me and some of the wallets I've had off the kids, but it's just there's
Behaviour is a form of communication. It's the first form of
Mm.
communication that a lot of these children, as you said, some of them not even being able to verbalise how they're feeling, their emotions, what they want. It's behaviour. So sometimes acting out is actually them trying to communicate.
A couple of the young people I've worked with, one really does come to mind, child on parent violence. He's witnessed DV. He's been impacted by his developmental trauma, and so obviously he's not just going to pick up a relationship with a stranger straight away. But now he's had a really rough day at school. I get a voice message this morning from the mum saying he's had a really hard day at school, and I asked him what happened, and in the same sentence he told me what happened. He said, "When am I seeing Liam again?" Young people need that, especially at the pubescent age. You're pivoting away from parents. You're not interested in your parents when you're 13.
Yeah.
Like, they're not even part of your life anymore. Well, they'd like to think that anyway. And you look to same-sex role models that you can model your behaviour on, who you would like to become really, in a sort of way. And it's a beautiful thing to be the safe person that they feel they can spit out the poison to. And it dissipates, and you can have really, really quality conversations with these kids.
Fabulous. So just out of interest, because you've spoken a lot about the boys that you help, or the lads that you help, what's your kind of split?
We were something like 90% at the start of the year, and now that's a lot more even. I think it's 22% are girls in the one-to-one, and then that's a little bit higher for our youth groups. So we run 2 youth groups. One's on Monday. Embers, I mentioned, for kids who are suffering from social anxiety. Most of them are ASD. And then Tuesday, the working title for this group was Chaos Group. These are much more externalisers, ADHD, they're being excluded from school, and all the rest of it. So there's much more of an equitable sort of gender split between those.
It'd be really interesting to see, as people find out about Apollo, whether that split changes, because generally speaking, this is a very generalised thing, but autistic girls will fly under the radar at school, so they probably won't act out. They will keep it all and internalise it all until they get home. So you probably wouldn't get the referrals from school or social services. So you maybe start to get the referrals from the families.
That's happening already, and really interestingly, I'm not 100% if I'm at liberty to say any details, but I'll say that a team in this space has a split that is the opposite of ours, where they're predominantly young girls, and they either have ASD or they present as if they have ASD, and they're developing physiological symptoms, but there's no underlying cause. So these are the next generations of people with fibromyalgia, with chronic pain.
Exactly.
It's a very interesting thing. So that's that's one of our many sort of, we're trying to meet a need in that space very soon.
If we go back to the N&D community, because we're trying to kind of, this podcast is obviously to introduce Apollo and the services that you offer, which are fantastic. And thank God for people like you.
Oh, thank you.
But as well as that, is how would people get in touch with you? So if they are starting to kind of see, should they wait till a certain point that it tips over, or can they just, if they start to see some kind of maybe small changes? So where we tend to see a lot of kind of issues coming forward is that transition between the primary school and the secondary school. Now, I know you said the youngest child that you had was 9 years of age. That feels really young. However, we seem to have that kind of transition, that bit where they're kind of, the big kids in the small school, and then they go to being the small kids in the big school. And there's a lot of change for neurodivergent children. They're going to a new environment. There's lots of changes. There's new subjects to learn. There's new people. There's new dynamics to learn. There's a new school route to learn. Potentially getting on a different school bus or getting to school. There's a lot of learning there, and that can cause a lot of anxiety and trauma and
moving classrooms between
loads of different things. Just the environment, the noise, everything can feel really difficult. Specifically because they tended to be in the same primary school with the same set of children, more or less, throughout the last 6-7 years that they've been in that school. The same teacher for a whole year, so they get to know that child a lot more personally than if you were in a high school, a senior school setting. So we notice usually then that's where we start to see the cracks appearing. So is that a good time to get involved? When is a good time?
Well,
before it gets kind of too far where you're having the selective mutism and people not leaving the bedroom for 6 months. This is that to me, that feels like it's gone maybe too far. Is there anything that can be done preventatively or before it gets to that stage?
Short answer is yes. You're never going to harm a child by having another positive contact in their life, but for the ND, for a young person who's neurodivergent, it matters more because they find it difficult to make those human-to-human connections for all those reasons we spoke about before.
And it takes longer.
It does take longer. It definitely takes longer. I remember my first day of secondary school, and I was on the bus, and I felt like there was a lump in my throat. I remember thinking like, I can get off the bus and, I'm not going to go to school, but I don't think I'm neurodivergent. And I used to be a lot more shy, but I think if that's my experience, what's it going to be for a neurodivergent kid who's going to one of these large comprehensives, large classrooms, with the adult to child ratio, for not particularly nice reasons, just child mortality back in the day, there used to be a much higher ratio of adults to young people. Now you have these massive classrooms with teachers who have to maintain an element of authority, and these aren't environments that neurodivergent kids are going to feel at home in, especially after you've just had 6 weeks of holiday. Oftentimes, where they're not going to want to socialise too much, they're recovering from primary school.
There's also that other end of school where if an ND child has made it all the way through school, they may very well come out and then face burnout, or come out and they effectively fall off a cliff. They're out of their 18, they're out of CAMS, they're out of all these things. In the future, do you see yourself expanding your service to beyond children, to sort of young adult?
That's naturally happening. I've got 2 19-year-olds actually that I'm working with at the moment, and they've essentially experienced that. One of them's not had the best sort of experience of service provision on Ireland, and then once he reaches 18, he's dropped. He's literally dropped. And big shout out to Grow Limited. My God. So I supported him for his first session there, and like the staff just get it.
How many children are you currently kind of working with?
48 last year, 48 young people. 75% of our one-to-one mentoring cohort graduated to youth groups. To say that more than 50% of our service users have been refusing support services in school, I'm over the moon with that.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
That what we're doing is working, so we're just going to grow it. Last year, there's a point we can just employ loads of people and we can scale, so to speak. But I'm guarding what we're doing fairly tightly. So I've employed people who I've known personally for a very long time. I've seen them work with young people and I trust them 100%.
Yeah.
And so that's why we've been able to maintain the sort of positive momentum we've got. I don't want to dilute what we're doing at all.
Yeah.
So it's going to be slow, steady, but very definite growth in what we've been doing. Yeah.
Fabulous.
So is there anything like this in anywhere else in the world? So is there like an Apollo or similar in the UK, for example, or other, the US?
There are, I'm not sure about the US, there are similar projects. I've actually done a couple of visits last year. I'm in contact with a couple of projects as well. I'm not going to name them for now. There's one lad who's hopefully going to be coming to visit Guernsey, and there's one I'm looking to visit in Bristol as well. There are other people doing great things in this space, and we're not looking to completely reinvent the wheel, which is what I thought I was doing, but I was just so focused on what I was doing. But there's loads of people in this space doing amazing work.
It must get very lonely, I guess, trying to push through something like this, knocking on doors and looking for support and cracking a nut, I suppose. It must get a little bit, where do you get your motivation from? Where does your kind of sustenance come from? Where you think, I can keep doing this, I can keep going?
That's a really good question, because the work itself is intrinsically rewarding. I'm doing something that I love. It's what I'm best at. It's what is needed, and I can earn a livelihood from it.
Yeah.
So it's just things are in place.
But is there also a level of frustration when you think it doesn't need to be this way? Children don't need to be in this state. There's so many things that could be put in place actually before you guys get involved that could mitigate a lot of the trauma that these children are going through.
It's why I started my own company. I don't want to complain about how things are. I want to build the solution. If you guys have read my newsletter I send out for Apollo every week, you can get that sense. Like, one week is going to be joyous and here's all the success we've had and here's what we're building, and other weeks it's like frustration. It doesn't need to be this way. And that's because we're at a juncture, aren't we? There's two paths. Are we going to keep going down this path, or actually are we going to imagine a new world? There are people who are building different things in other education, as an example. Look at the Scandinavian countries. I think there was actually something in, it might be the 2010s, where we had a look at nature-based education and shorter school days. All the kids are happier. They've got high scores. It's like, why aren't we just at least like investigating or just trialing, iterate, make a little test school, try it. We're doing that, yes, in terms of relationship building, a level of pastoral care, a level of engagement. Somebody needs to do that with education, I'd say. The issue is with bureaucracies, with social services, these are large, bloated ships, and they take not days or weeks or months to turn, but years. And so in terms of neurodivergence, for example, in state schools, are the accommodations that are being made sufficient? Maybe they are for a few kids, but for kids who are suffering ADHD, autism, school distress, no, it's not enough. Otherwise they'd be in school, wouldn't they? But that's nobody's fault necessarily. It's just the way things are.
It's the system, isn't it?
The system. So we've got to build a new system. That's what we're trying to do with Apollo, and I think
that'd be wonderful with a self-directed school. So if a child doesn't learn to read till they're 11, they don't read till they're 11. It's okay, they still learn to read, they do it in their own time. And then we're really teaching kids, or kids are learning what they learn at the right time. You know, it's stages, not ages.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we were speaking before, we were talking about how children learn best through play, and they connect through play. You said you've gone into people's houses and you throw a pillow at them or something like that. You say, right, we're going to play a game, or we're going to do this. And people, you know, learn, children learn better that way, but they also learn better through what they're interested in that time. So trying to force them to learn subjects, to learn about things that they don't see any relevance in that moment, in that space. I don't see the relevance in learning about Pythagoras' theorem, but I would be really interested in learning about DNA in genetics. That's really fascinating. What I always think we kind of, we're very prescriptive. And what we need to do sometimes is take a step back and, as you say, maybe be more child-centred.
And actually our education system is getting more prescriptive, not less prescriptive. I think teachers have a really hard job.
Yeah. They do. And I'm not for a second going to knock teachers. Like we work really closely with a couple of the SLT, and they're working their butts off. And there's... actually, I will name the school. I'll name Lamar. When I was doing some work in there maybe 3-4 years ago, supporting their DV provision, which worked amazingly. It was the highest number of kids who had been on a bronze DV. It was brilliant. And it's not as chaotic as it sounds, actually. But that had become so welcoming and so close a community, and it took so long to develop that. It's such a long time.
It's back to relationships, right?
It is, and the same teachers. And the thing is, if you have a faculty and there's loads of different elements, they've not necessarily worked together for a very long time. You have a new way of working, new principal. And things aren't really coordinated. You've got a cohort of kids coming in here. You have a school that's got 3 times the amount of kids that are supposed to be there. It's just not gonna settle, is it? I recently visited a child-led school last year. And
which one did you go to?
I went to Learn Life in Barcelona. One experience I had with Learn Life, I made sure I spoke to the student afterwards. The student had delivered a tour in Catalan, Spanish, and English.
Wow.
And she'd answered questions, and she showed us around. And then afterwards I said, wow, like you did so well. That was amazing, good work. And so I found out she had gone to a private school in Europe. And she'd ended up getting so anxious about going into school that she just decided, no, I'm done with it. And then she's gone to a centre where she's leading her learning, rather than the outcomes being chunks of knowledge that will then be regurgitated in an exam and then forgotten for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
She's integrating her learning, she's teaching other people within the school, including the teachers, in these sort of lower pressure environments. There's other ways we can do.
Dr. Naomi Fisher talks a lot about our school system is more of a memory system. You know, we're teaching them to regurgitate facts. So actually, kids who go to school are better at remembering facts to then regurgitate. But kids who are self-directed learners are learn more kind of how to manipulate the information and really use it in everyday life.
Because the true sign of intelligence is it's not about what you can recant, but it's how you apply that information. It's the application of information and knowledge that is actually where the real intelligence lies. I just wonder if maybe there is a real shift that needs to be made. And
I think it's starting actually.
And I don't mean just for ND children. I think it's probably bigger picture stuff, because I think since we've gone through the pandemic, everyone's life has changed in some way, whether that's you working at home more or you've kind of evaluated your life and what's important. And I think that then needs to kind of be fed into schools and education and how we look at, childhood.
Yeah.
Because it's so fundamental. And I just wonder if maybe there's a different approach that could actually look at changing people's ACEs, for example. So look at changing those scores, straight away, when things happen, that these children are picked up, and that can be managed in different ways, as opposed to it coming out in a traumatic way and having an impact on this kind of road of life that we all have to go down.
Yeah. Bruce Perry quote, and unfortunately you're not going to be able to change the ACE score. In terms of how we improve life outcomes, Dr. Bruce Perry's opinion is that the number and quality of trusted adult relationships is what's going to help young people overcome their trauma responses.
And that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I mean, it does make a lot of sense. If you've got people around you, and whether you're a child or an adult, a teenager, if you've got people around you who are supportive and who you can look to for real, genuine, authentic guidance, who have your best interests at heart, then that can only be a good thing. That can only have positive outcomes. So it makes sense.
Yeah, that's that therapeutic web.
But it's going back to the community as well. And we said now, a lot of times we feel disconnected from our community, and then a lot of the children that you're dealing with probably feel completely disconnected from their community, whether that's their own family as a community, whether that's the education system, if they've been through that, whether that is social community, friendship groups, etc. They feel so disconnected that they've decided to lock themselves away. And therein lies the issue.
Yeah, definitely connection. I will mention technology again. I think the extent to which phone, social media, video game addiction is impacting young people's ability to connect with each other, I think it's being underestimated or it's being ignored. A lot of the kids I work with, there's I've used this example quite a bit, a girl who I met for an afternoon session, whatever it was, 3 or 4 o'clock, and she had clocked up 12 hours screen time.
That day?
Already. So she's up all night, she's scrolling.
So there's no balance.
There's just absolutely no balance whatsoever. And it's up to parents to hopefully set those boundaries, which some of them are unable to do. And I've noticed a lot with the kids I've worked with is they know they have to set the boundaries, but they're not willing to accept the blow up that's going to ensue from setting that boundary.
They're picking their fights, maybe.
They are for good reason, but the long-term damage that's being brought is greater than the short-term blow up, which is going to be big.
Yeah, and it's really difficult, isn't it? Because technology has so many positives.
And it really has for the ND community, to be fair. It really has a lot of positives.
But it's that balance, and it's how to get that balance so that they're spending time outside and they're socialising and all that, and they can spend some time doing what they want on screen as well.
Yeah, sometimes it can be the only way that a child can access the learning or the special interests that they might have. They may not have access to that particular topic if it's something quite unique. Trends, for example, we don't have any in Guernsey. And if a child is like really interested in learning about trends, then the internet is one of the places that they can go. There you go.
Yeah.
We noticed with our girls, their screen time decreased as they came out of burnout and their system regulated. So that was quite interesting.
For my work, and this isn't always the case, but some of it can be shock and awe, circuit breaker. We're going out and we're doing this. And then there's a positive feedback loop that started from that engagement. And then you have youth groups adventures where you've got more time, more intensity of experience, and then that can be carried into their life with a bit more momentum, in theory.
Sounds fantastic.
It really does. So if people wanted to know more about Apollo, if they wanted to maybe refer a child, how do they do that?
You could get in touch with me. You could check out our website. I would personally suggest that you check out our socials, which are on Facebook /Apollo Guernsey, or the same on LinkedIn, where we actually share little snippets about what we're doing. those could be one-to-one sessions in our youth groups and adventures, so you can get sort of flavour for how we work, what the young people say, what the parents are saying. There's some really amazing feedback across there.
Liam, thank you so much.
I feel like
it's a real benefit to the neurodiverse community on the island, and thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Most welcome.
If there are people out there who are listening and either have similar experience, or if there's any success stories as well, so please by all means get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Just a quick shout out to EasyDo. Without EasyDo, we wouldn't be able to do this podcast. They've lent us all their tech. We're really grateful.
Thank you.